Welcome back, everybody. This is the ISA Insider News. My name is Max Tim.
And I am Shayna Weber. And this week's headline for the week of April 18th is all about CinemaCon and the summer box office.
Summer box office used to be what seemed like such a bigger deal. It's a huge deal. It's still a huge deal. When I was younger, I guess I paid more attention to the big movies that were coming out and the big adventure movies. Maybe it's an age thing.
I think we both grew up in smaller towns, right? I mean, all you did was go to the movies on Friday night and wait in line and see if you can get in.
There are reasons to be excited. I just think that, well, and Shayna and I talked about this beforehand, we both agree that could be one of the more interesting and important CinemaCons in a long time.
So CinemaCon is happening beginning April 25th in Las Vegas. And it says in this article that we're talking about in Hollywood Reporter, it says that all 5 major Hollywood studios will show up in Las Vegas beginning April 25th to lay their cards on the table and tout their 2022 slate of movies to theater owners still trying to emerge from the pandemic while battling changing consumer habits.
It's a big deal. I mean, it's the National Association of Theater Owners, oddly enough, NATO. And this article, is just a really quick interview. It's a really short interview, everybody, and you can try to find this. We'll put a link, of course, in the video, but it's an interview with the president of NATO. And they just talk really briefly about a couple interesting things about how Apple released Coda after it won its Oscar into the theaters. He has some interesting thoughts about that. And then, of course, they talk about just the release window now and how different it is. It's really, you spotted something really interesting, Shayna, that we can kind of talk about and go back and forth.
Yeah, I found it really interesting in that quote that I just mentioned from the article, that it's saying that these movie studios are going to almost like pitch their movies to theaters to say, hey, my movie's good enough, we'll make you money, put it in your theater. Instead of, it always felt like it was the other way around. And it was more of a theaters trying to get that big movie or trying to be the one to hold that movie. And the studios kind of being like, well, who's gonna give us the best deal, or who's gonna put it in the most theaters? Or, you know, it just feels like a flip a little bit in terms of now it's studios really trying to like woo movie theaters.
Which is interesting, and I think it says a lot about where the industry is right now, because a lot of movies, as most of you watching this already know, are not even being released into theaters. They're just going straight to a streaming service, but not all of them. And so I think a big back and forth here is, yes, the studios are going to have to pitch some of these theaters and be like, look, we see the benefit of having some form of a release theatrically first and then go to a streaming service. The window will be a lot shorter. Here's the amount of time, like everything is changing. But then there's also this level of, do the theaters really want a lot of movies in their theater, or do they have a select few? Because it's still kind of up in the air with just how many people are going to be going to the theaters this summer. Probably a lot more than last year, but I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of really big movies coming out. So listen to this list of these movies that they're expecting to tease and show the entire movie. So in the case of Top Gun Maverick, they're showing the entire movie at their exhibit at CinemaCon. Jurassic World Dominion, Black Adam, The Flash, the Toy Story spinoff Lightyear. Then there's Minions, The Rise of Gru, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, and Thor, the new Thor that just released their trailer today, which I'm very excited about. I'm a huge Thor fan. Not so much the other Avengers, but I love Thor.
The huge one, which I'm really excited about in terms of just seeing how well it does, is Avatar 2. They've been talking about.
I'm not excited about that.
I mean, I don't know how excited I am to go see it. I'm just really, because Avatar literally made over $1 billion. And so,
right.
How's this?
And they called it unobtainium. Ew. And they've still made $1 billion.
Yeah, right.
Sorry. I'll never get over that. Unobtainium. Really? And a planet called Pandora. Real original, guys.
Right. It's an interesting article, really quick interview. One thing I thought was interesting was that the president of NATO specifically said, in response to this Apple releasing Coda after it won its Oscar, he said, there's no doubt that a movie released exclusively in theaters and then later on whatever streaming service fares better. And when I read that, I just thought, boy, that seems like something the president of NATO would say.
Has to say.
Because I don't know, we don't necessarily know what these numbers are that Netflix and HBO Max and everyone may not release all the numbers and how well the movie does, because it's all based on subscription models. And so it's such a weird world out there where film is.
It's changed that whole model of how movies fare in that first weekend, whether streaming or box office, because we don't know the streaming numbers, really. It's all up in the air with sharing and how many people are in the room. And, it's not as simple as it used to be.
Not nearly as simple. And I don't know if I consider myself a film purist, like a lot of people might. Like, if you have to see a movie, you got to see it in the theater because that's how it was meant to be seen. I think it completely depends on the movie. But at the same time, great stories are great stories. And yes, if you have an Avatar 2 or a Top Gun Maverick, you should probably see that on a bigger screen. But I have an 86-inch TV with the surround sound in my living room. And I'm like,
right.
Oh, no, I can watch it here.
Looks good to me.
Anyway, we're just going to talk about the box office from this past weekend, because it is obviously a little connected to the top headline for what we were just talking about, the CinemaCon. And I found it just absolutely amazing. And Shayna was not even remotely surprised that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 had made $30 million this past weekend.
I'm not surprised, because it's a kids movie, and kids movie bring in kids and parents.
Yeah.
And I heard it's funny. I actually heard it's good. The buzz around the parent. I'm just going to give you the buzz around the parents, table is Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is fun.
That's why it's making that much money. They're bringing not only themselves, the parent or multiple parents, and probably multiple children. So you're all, one little party is probably an $80 day. What are ticket prices for kids
true.
nowadays?
It depends when you go, but matinee for kids, I think it's not that bad. At our theater here, it's like maybe $8.
Okay.
$7. For adult matinee, it's $9, which is great.
Yeah,
so
that's pretty good.
I was happy to see that Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I have yet to see because I can't get myself to the theater and I really want to, that it's doing really well.
I've heard so many great things. I'm going back to what the president of NATO said about how movies fare better when they go to the theater first. Maybe from a place of like exclusivity, like The Lost City, I would have absolutely watched that on Netflix. If it was on Netflix, I'm like, yeah, I would totally watch that, but I'm not going to go to the theater to see it. So it's actually making me remember to go see it. But then again, does that mean people are also thinking the same way as I am, and then they're not going to go to the theater? I don't know. It's like a weird math equation. I don't.
I feel the same way. It's this weird, but I think Everything Everywhere All at Once, they did make it exclusive to theaters, and therefore people are hearing the buzz, as we did in the olden days of movies, and now going to see it in the theaters. You don't want to miss it, because who knows when it's going to be streaming. That's also the thing. It's not a direct from screen to streaming. We don't know. And we don't know which app it's going to be on. So, it's like, oh, I got to go.
It's interesting. There's a whole article from Forbes that we're not going to go into it too much, but they really break down how quickly Fantastic Beasts and that franchise is fading. It's too bad, because when I saw the trailer to it, I'm like, this is one that I would probably go see. It has all these characters that I'm recognizing. It's not a completely new story. We're kind of getting into a little bit closer to the actual Harry Potter, age. And so it made $43 million this weekend, and it was a failure. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with this, because they were supposed to have 5 of these, and this is the 3rd.
I think it's just one of those things that's like riddled with controversy. It seems like everybody in it, like Johnny Depp left, Mads Mikkelsen took over, who's amazing and should be leading movies everywhere. Yeah. But then Ezra Miller just got, in trouble with the law. And it feels like it's kind of one of those movies where at this time in the world, you kind of are like, I want to be hands off a little bit. I'm going to wait till maybe I'll watch it later. I don't know.
Let's move over to this week in ISA Insider.
First, I'm going to start with this video that I just watched on Variety. That's one of their top videos. And the headline is total clickbait. Nic Cage making out with himself. And I don't know if people are aware of this movie that premiered at South by Southwest. It's called The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. And it's essentially a movie about Nicolas Cage playing a heightened version of Nicolas Cage. And he gets himself in trouble. He's sort of like a down and out actor. he gets paid $1 million to go to a birthday party of Pedro Pascal, who plays this crazy character who is, you don't know if he's good or bad, but he's certainly a fan of Nicolas Cage. So it's an action adventure, comedy sort of thing. But apparently in the movie, Nicolas Cage, in the multiverse sense of current Nicolas Cage, makes out with his younger self, Nicolas Cage, and like full on makes out with himself. And, and I just think that's amazing. And now I need to see it.
He really is a national treasure.
So that happened.
You can click on the video tab on the Variety homepage, and you'll see a whole bunch of interviews that they did, and that's how I found it. But
yes, but I had to talk about it because it was funny.
Yeah, no, I want to see it. All right, so Script Magazine, flip the script. This is an interesting article. I kind of giggled by the end of it. I don't know if you happen to know why, but what did you think of the article? I'm
more interested in this idea because it feels like working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
It's an article written by John James Miller, and it's in Script Magazine on ISA Insider page. And it's all about adapting your screenplay into a novel and then using that as IP, which is what seems to be the buzzword, in selling any script or story, is having IP. I think it's genius, but it comes with a lot of baggage, in my opinion, because if you don't have people buying your novel, then it's work either way. I think it's a really cool idea. And I've even thought about it, of taking a different angle. But what did you think?
The idea in and of itself, if you have a script, and this person who wrote the article was mentioning how his script was actually doing relatively well in contests, but it wasn't necessarily gaining traction from a business standpoint as a screenplay. And so he went to this panel. Oh, it was during the 2008 writing strike. And it was actually a really negative panel at this expo. And they were like, you should just convert all of your scripts into novels. It's a fantastic idea. And it makes sense to do that. I did that with my book. The reason mainly I did it was because it was a fantasy adventure with a whole new world created and all these different rules. And so you would just have more time to spend on those elements in a book. And people expect to delve into those, things in a novel. And so it worked technically better as a book. The reason I kind of giggled because it's a really short article, but by the end of it, it was pretty much telling us, go do it. But then I was left with, well, how?
Yeah.
This is a lot.
But I have a webinar, but there's a webinar you can watch and you can find out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a little bit of a marketing article, but
don't give your secrets away for free.
Yeah,
I get it.
It's just because I know how difficult it is, and it's a lot easier said than done. But I found a level of freedom in it because I wasn't bound by a certain page count. My first draft of my book was literally a copy and paste from my final draft document, the screenwriting document. So we just had to take a little cut because my cat was just about to jump off of a very high ledge. I had to pause for a second and save him from himself. But no, what I was doing in terms of the adaptation process was a literal copy and paste from my final draft screenwriting software into Word without any of the formatting. And suddenly I looked at, the script that I had was maybe 115 pages or something. And suddenly I had like 60 pages, 55 pages of a book. And I thought, all right, well, now it looks like a book and I'm not worried about the formatting. Then I jumped into the story and the characters, and I was able to expound on them. I was able to give them more backstory. I added a couple of characters to add to some of the opponents and villains, and it filled the story out that much more. Now then, adapting that back into a movie, it's technically a different story than the initial draft was. So it was like I was rewriting the story. So yeah, no, highly suggest at least considering that. If you have something that can work as a novel, if you have like some romantic comedy, it kind of depends.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I started converting a children's adventure film into a novel, and it was really fun because you didn't have the parameters in a screenplay. You could talk about their feelings. You could tell us how they felt, and it was just more expanding in the environment and sort of some fun things that were going on. So I found it really, really fun and freeing and kind of exciting, and opened up the story in a way that I didn't expect it to. So.
Yeah. You also quickly realized that, wow, there are some really good writers in the world.
Yeah, for sure, right?
Oh.
Like,
I did that when I read Patrick Rothfuss. He wrote a book called The Name of the Wind, and it's like Harry Potter for adults. If you haven't heard of The Name of the Wind and you love fantasy, oh my God. Just a genius in terms of his prose and literary style and ability. All right, so moving on to the next one. We've got why high concept films are popular in Hollywood. This is from Creative Screenwriter magazine.
Max, Mr. Educator, what does high concept mean? I think that's a question that a lot of people think that they know the answer to.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of different variations on what high concept means. And that's why I chose this article specifically for us to talk about, because I think it's a really great topic to discuss and sort of clarify what high concept is.
Yeah, it's a tough one to just simplify and be like, well, here it is, because everything's different and relative as far as the type of high concept, because you can look at a Lord of the Rings and be like, sure, it's high concept, but not really. I mean, if you look at how detailed and how many different layers and just how huge the story is, it's difficult to outright say it's high concept. From a marketing standpoint, A Liar Liar or The Purge,
right.
Those really easy ideas, those ideas that are just so easy to market and tell the audience, here's what you can expect to experience when you're seeing this movie. That's ultimately the easiest way to say what high concept is.
Yeah, it doesn't need a lot of explaining to go into it. It's sort of just like Sharknado. You're mixing a shark and a tornado. Go. You know, you're like, oh, and sort of the world opens up for you when you hear it, and you're like, you can visualize it very fast, very simply, and sort of know what it is.
I think that's the key point, and I think it's our job as writers, whether you're writing a low concept idea is something like Lady Bird or The Power of the Dog, or something dramatic but specific. Even those lower concept ideas, even when compared to high concept idea, you still have to get to that place in a pitch or a log line where the reader is able to visualize the situation, like you were just saying, Shanna, where we have to be able to see it, whether it's high concept or low concept. A high concept is just a little bit easier to understand the middle of the movie. Here's the moment that we're going to be experiencing. We're going to see Jim Carrey as a lawyer, unable to lie for 24 hours. And that's just that moment over and over again.
Right.
That's the easiest way to think about it.
Well, it's a great article. It's in Creative Screenwriter magazine on ISA Insider. Make sure you check out ISA Insider. There's news articles that change all the time. You can just literally go in there and find a new article to read and learn something new or learn something old that you forgot.
Right. Review. We were talking about this before. Shannon was saying that you aren't really watching anything new since our last broadcast, but why is that?
I feel like I haven't had anything that's like jumping out. There's things I want to see. I would like to see Severance. I would like to get into that. I would like to finish Succession. But it feels like an event that I have to really focus in on. And some nights after putting the child to sleep, I just don't have a lot of bandwidth left in my brain to focus on something. So I tend to choose the lower level, like Housewives show or something, just for my brain to not have to think or watch it.
Totally.
Really, and that's terrible. But that's the truth. So
it's an emotional investment because you're following along, you're trying to participate in something, and you're like, okay, especially with the Successions of the world. That's why you have half-hour comedies. That's why you've got, easy to consume reality TV, because people can just zone out. Like last night, I couldn't really think of what to watch. And then I saw Tyler Henry, The Hollywood Medium. He's got a new series on Netflix. And it's interesting. Awesome. It's really well done. And it's hard for me to be like, he's absolutely the real deal, but I think he is, if you believe in that kind of thing. But what I found was interesting is that I like seeing him do the interviews, the medium work, but then they're stringing together through this Netflix series a little story about how he's trying to figure out his mom's ancestry. And it was getting a little late. It was like 10:15, 10:30, and there was another 20-ish minutes of the show, and they were going to cut into that storyline. And I'm like, like a continuation.
It's real late, guys.
Well, it's late.
10 o'clock, 10:15. I mean, I'm not laughing. I'm laughing along because it's the truth for me too. I'm like, oh, it's getting kind of late, guys.
Yeah.
Gotta go to sleep.
But I am very excited to hear that you told me something before we recorded about one of my favorite half-hour shows.
I just saw on the wrap that Ghosts on CBS was the highest rated show on Thursday night, right alongside SVU, which always does well, but it actually beat SVU in viewers. So Max is super happy about that. I haven't seen it yet.
Apparently by a lot. They're like 6 million plus viewers versus 4 million plus viewers. So that's a lot of people watching Ghosts. And I don't know how they tally that. Is it only, the literal air broadcast or the digital broadcast, or is it also, because I watch it through, I think, Paramount Plus or something. So I don't know how they track these things. But if you're not watching Ghosts and you want something easy to consume, it's just candy. It's a half-hour comedy. I would argue it's like an elevated sitcom. It's just a blast. Apparently, it's not even as good as the British version. I need to watch the British version because that, I guess, is even funnier.
Coming up, so I'm going to give you my forecast of what I will be watching. This weekend, I'll be watching The Bad Guys, which is an new animated movie, I believe, from DreamWorks, and it's based on a book series that kids are absolutely crazy about. It's about the big bad wolf and this Mr. Snake and Mr. Piranha, and they're bad guys who, in the book, they just decide to be good, but I think in the movie, they get in trouble and then they have to do good. So I'm interested to see sort of how they adapted this on the screen, but seeing that in the theater this weekend. And I'm looking forward to The Flight Attendant season 2.
Ooh, I haven't watched the first one. I heard it's like really bingeable.
Yes, it's fun.
Yep. And lastly, I finished the first season of Minx on HBO Max. We are releasing a Max Reacts video on that. I had a ton of fun doing this video, by the way. It's completely absurd, especially my intro. But Minx is so good. It's one of my favorite half-hour comedies I've seen in a long time because it's so much more than just a comedy. It's about so much more. And I have you, Shayna, to thank for that because you told me about it.
Well, I only watched it because my company's name is Rebel Minx. And there's a lot of shows and things coming out with a rebel in them and Minx in them. And I was like, ah! But it's fine because I like Minx too.
Lastly, there's an event coming up.
Go to the events page on ISA and check out the events coming up. We do have an event on Wednesday with Max. We have an event on Thursday. And then moving forward, the next one coming up, the big one, on May 6th, I'm talking to Mickey Daughtry and Tobias Iaconis, and they are the writers of 5 Feet Apart, The Curse of La Llorona, and Night Books, which is a great movie on Netflix if you have not seen it. And we're talking to them about their career and their origin story, but also Mickey and Tobias are really great in the room. They're really good pitchers. She's sort of figured out the formula of how to like really tap into the emotional levels of people, producers and execs in the room. So we're going to really try to dive into if she can give some tips on pitching, but it's going to be a really great event. May 6th, go to the event page to register. Yeah,
and my event is coming up on Wednesday, the 20th, I believe, and I'm going to be talking about the difference between feature structure and TV structure. It's free. You can register on the events page on the ISA. Okay, Twitter question / viewer mail. Here we go. We've got one, and it's a good one. Regina Kim on Twitter, legitimate question. Why is the use of suddenly in scripts hated so much?
It's a great question. And I opened it and I was like reading down because I'm really interested in that also. And for my opinion, I try to use it sparingly and try to use it only when necessary. But I don't think it's like, you hear stories of like, oh, so-and-so threw a script away because they've read suddenly in it. It's very dramatic.
Alarming, in case you didn't put alarming.
It's an adverb, Sam. It's a lazy tool of the weak mind. Period. Done.
For me, I use it sometimes if it feels right, but I try not to use it repeatedly. If it's 6 or 7 times in your script, probably not good. But Max, from your standpoint, like when you're a writer who uses suddenly, what do you think the negative about that is?
I think you're right, because it's only really a negative if you're overusing it and you're trying to force a feeling of suddenly, when you can do it in a more cinematic way. You can do something with the word suddenly and just throw the visual at me. Just use a hyphen and suddenly crash, bang, boom, or something, or whatever it might be in terms of the moment that we're going to see. If it really is suddenly, but you're going to be like, you're using it for comedic reasons, or like you're saying, like there's a reason to use it so that I, the reader, am supposed to read the word. I think that's an important thing to remember as writers, that every word in the script, there really isn't anything that you can consider as a throwaway, because the reader is reading every single word and they think that every single word's important. even if it's unconscious. And so if you're overusing suddenly, that they're just going to be like boy who cries wolf kind of thing. Like, it's not very sudden.
I kind of went down a rabbit hole a little bit, and I read something interesting that just popped in my brain. I read that there's people who use suddenly in action lines, and then you can use it for emotions. And when you use it for action lines, there's probably a better way to do it. And then you're also sometimes giving away before the action happens, and you don't want to do that. You want to, if you do it correctly, there's a way to show the action without going, suddenly this happened. You can assume, bam, this happened. Right. For emotions, I read that sometimes you do use suddenly if that person suddenly has a change of how they're feeling, and you need to say that. I thought that was interesting. And then the other thing I found was interesting is down the rabbit hole is that if you are using it, don't beat yourself up, because scripts that were nominated for best writing for Oscars, there's like a list on Reddit or something. And I think that American Beauty has it 4 times in the script, and a whole bunch of other ones has it once or twice. So, don't beat yourself up, but if there's a better way to describe what you're talking about in a more dynamic cinematic way, then choose another word.
Totally. If a
maybe do a suddenly pass.
Yeah, you should do a word pass, like do it just an edit pass as opposed to a rewrite pass. Just look at how you're starting each scene direction line, or how often I noticed in one of my writers' scripts, this was maybe a week or so ago, and she used the word creepy like 6 or 7 times in like 35 pages, and she didn't realize she was doing that. And I'm like, well, it starts to become a pattern, It's just editing. But if a reader literally tosses your script away or says I hate the script because they see suddenly once or twice in the read, give me a break. The person's having a bad day. This is not enough for you to feel like your life is over. Finally, going to the good news of the week, we've got some fun, actually very specific pieces of news that within it has good news. For one thing, Ryan Reynolds is just like finding as many reasons to be the greatest person on the planet as much as possible. But there's an article on Variety. Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively's group effort initiative partners with Netflix to expand hiring pool. So basically, I believe it was last year, they had an initiative to make sure that there was an intern program, a training program for behind the scenes crew members to be trained and brought on to work on the films that Ryan and Blake were producing, and other pieces of the Netflix pie from diverse and underrepresented backgrounds. So there was an emphasis on that, and now they're expanding that initiative to allow even more people to have the opportunity to just start from scratch and get into the film community or TV world. But what I love about the program is that it's allowing people who have not yet had the opportunity to try something new and to see how production is done by starting at the bottom rung of the ladder and then work their way up, because it's a great way. Even if someone doesn't think they want to work in the lighting department, they do want to work in the industry. And a lot of those people didn't even realize that that's a way in. I just think it's a great opportunity.
I think it's great. It's about accessibility, essentially. And there's a lot of people out there, whether it has to do with where you live or your economic abilities or school or whatever, sometimes it's about accessibility and you don't have access. And I think this program is great because it's creating access where access was not available. Right. And that's amazing. So yay for Ryan Reynolds, the next, Tom Hanks of the world.
I know, Ryan and Blake, they're both in there equally. They're doing some awesome things. I kind of wish I could be friends with them, but
I do too.
The state of Illinois is kind of doing the same thing. The state of Illinois, which is just south of me, in terms of where I am, they already had a really good tax credit for production in the state. They just expanded it for it to be that much better. I won't go into all the details in terms of the tax credit, stuff, because that is a whole other broadcast. But what I thought was really cool is they're creating, and it says in this article, new pathways for women and minorities. The legislation that they just recently passed to expand the tax credit creates the Illinois Production Workforce Development Fund for the purpose of providing grants to qualified training programs with an emphasis on developing employment pathways for minorities and women. So it's a lot of like what Brian Reynolds and Blake Lively are doing. They're trying to offer opportunities for people that had not yet had that opportunity, and the state is willing to basically pay training programs to help them do that, which is really pretty awesome and special. A lot of states are starting to do this.
That's awesome. I mean, I think that's great news of the week.
Yeah, it's good news of the week. So if you want to shoot something, come on over to the state of Illinois in the Midwest, but not today because it's 32 degrees and snowing in mid-April.
And Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, if you would like to be our friends, then
Right.
go ahead and comment below and we'll reach out.
Come spend some time in the Midwest in April. You'll love it here. I promise.
And
All
I'm
right,
in LA,
everybody.
so you just call me up.
Yeah, right. Shane is already in California. If you can forget me, you can just hang out with her. I think that's it for the week, everybody. We're going to be back next week. Lots happening, but it's, if you have anything to comment on, put it in the comment section. What are you watching? Any questions you might have? What do you think of Ghosts? Did you like Minx? I don't know, anything. And we'll comment back.
Let us know. Check out ISA Insider as always, and check us out on YouTube or on the ISA site.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good week.